Warning, this video contains spoilers for Star Trek Discovery Season 1 and Star Trek Discovery Season 2. Star Trek Discovery Season 2, Episode 7, Light and Shadows. While this episode, much like Episode 3, is being used to set up several moving story elements for the upcoming season, it didn't fall nearly as flat in my opinion. This episode was a mile wide and an inch deep, but it worked. We get multiple amazing character moments sprinkled into a temporal war subplot, with some great technobabble sprinkled all over on top just for good measure. Let's get into it. I enjoyed the conversation here between Michael and Pike, really showing off their great working relationship and respect that they're building towards each other. I also like that this episode takes place over Kaminar. I know that they said that they're only there to investigate the Red Angel's temporal signals, but it was nice to show that the planet is still there and not exploded after all the events of last week, and that the Federation hasn't just abandoned it. The Pike-Tyler fighting comes to a real nice head in this episode. It was a little cliche towards the end after they banter back and forth with each other, trapped inside the shuttle, but Trek is a little cliche sometimes, so I'm okay with it. Beautiful vista shots here of Vulcan are always a nice touch. I loved every single scene with the Sarek family together. We not only establish and dive into their family dynamics, but setting Amanda up as a more defiant character than we've really seen her before is great. I made comments earlier in this season that I wanted to see more of her in the show, and the writers are really delivering on that. I was surprised to see that Burnham agreed to bring Spock back to Leland at Section 31 instead of taking him to Pike on the Discovery. And some folks might criticize her for doing this, but we need to remember that he's clearly in enough emotional pain that it would, quote, kill a full-blooded Vulcan, and Burnham still feels really guilty about not taking care of Spock when they were kids. So it's fair to assume she'd turn to anyone at this point to try and save him.
Officers, our mission has now changed from research to rescue. The captain and Tyler are counting on us. Owashika, rectify our sensor issues by accounting for varying tachyon levels manually. Reese, continue studying the anomaly. We must understand the internal dynamics of the phenomenon in order to recognize deviations.
Because those deviations might be our missing shuttle.
Correct.
This scene with Saru is just amazing. I'll probably get demonetized for showing the whole thing, but I don't care. It's full-blown Trek here, and something that is clearly setting Saru up to be the captain of the Discovery after Pike departs. Really awesome stuff. This scene with Leland and Burnham was weirdly touching. Like, I don't know if this guy is a super secret a-hole that is manipulating her, or that he seems to genuinely believe what he's doing is the right thing here. There is enormous amounts of technobabble with this episode, and I could barely keep it straight. And because of that, there are some things that don't really make sense to me, such as the whole pinpointing their location math problem, beaming into the ship, Stamets' tardigrade blood-fueled eyes seeing through temporal distortions that other people can't. It's very confusing. These are somewhat negatives because it at times did take me out of the narrative, but overall it wasn't a huge detractor. Okay, so now let's get into the main purpose of this episode, setting up the plot for the rest of this season. First, we have the Discovery probe that traveled 500 years into the future and was sent back heavily modified to attack Pike's shuttle and start to download the ship's computer core. It was apparently looking for something very specific while also being extremely hostile towards the crew. Speaking of the probe, it's unclear at this point if it was searching for something or someone, as these 3 red orb signals seem to have affected Arium in some way. This device was sent back from around the year 2700, which puts it past anything OG Trek has been set in, and slightly behind the Calypso short Trek set in the 33rd century. I think this time period, the rumor that the Federation being an enemy in the Calypso episode, and my theory that Arium has melded with the Discovery for its 1,000-year-long stay in the cosmos are all connected in some way. What that connection might be is still very unclear though. Second, this episode establishing an internal power struggle between Georgiou and Leland for control of Section 31. And finally, the biggest reveal of all is that Spock has been muttering the coordinates of a planet known as Talos 4 to himself. Some of you might remember this planet from an old TOS episode that featured the original Pike and the Enterprise. In it, Pike and company meet a race of beings called the Talosians that can manipulate a person's mind into seeing and feeling almost anything. At this point in the timeline, I believe Pike and Spock were both on Talos 4 during their initial interaction with them about 2 years prior to Discovery Season 2. So Pike and Spock have already dealt with these people before, but it's unclear why Spock needs to go back to them specifically. But whatever it is has to do with his mental and emotional state. Some other things to note: no Culber or Reno in this episode. Pike and Tyler seem to have finally buried the hatchet. And based off of the dialogue between the Sarek family, it would seem as though Sybok is no longer a part of Star Trek. But maybe I'm just reading too much into those things. This moment with Burnham hugging Spock was really powerful, and I kinda wish he would wake up at this moment to comfort his sister. Towards the end of the episode, Pike is starting to agree with Tyler that the Red Angel's intentions might not be as good as we originally thought, and he makes an almost complete reference to the temporal Cold War, a plotline originally wrapped up back in Star Trek Enterprise Season 4. This episode was great on the character building, while doing a decent job at setting up our plot moving forward for the rest of the season. The preview for the next episode has honestly got me pumped up because I want to see where so many of these unanswered questions are going, and hopefully Spock can help us get to that answer. I'm really excited to see how all of this is going to start connecting back together.